First few Battlefield games did not include the single-player campaign, so they don't have any storyline. Battlefield 1942 obviously is settled in the World War II, giving players a chance to compete in many iconic battles like the Battle of Midway, Iwo Jima, Omaha Beach, Battle of Bulge, El Alamein, Stalingrad, and of course Berlin. Due to the huge success of the game, 2 expansions were released, Road to Rome and Secret Weapons of World War II, adding new maps, scenarios and weapons. Battlefield Vietnam also did not offer any story apart from the historical background of the game and maps inspired by the most important battles of that campaign. With Battlefield 2, perspective switches to modern warfare. It is set around 2007, during a global war pitting the United States and the European Union, aka Euroforce, against China, aka PLA, and the financial Middle Eastern Coalition, aka MEC. The game takes place on different fronts, with American and European forces invading China and the Middle Eastern countries, while Chinese forces invade the mainland United States. Though for the first time in the series the game offers a single-player campaign, there is no particular storyline, and it is based on multiplayer scenarios played against bots instead of other players online. US forces fight enemies over strategic points like nuclear power plant, oil fields, or even entire cities in China or Middle East. In the Special Forces expansion, perspective focuses on scenarios including special units like Navy SEALs, SAS, or Spetsnaz, fighting against the terrorists. In the Euroforce expansion, the European Union joins the conflict. After negotiating peace with Russia, the Union can perform an attack on mainland China to help Americans there. They also provide support in the Middle East with the Armored Fury expansion. The story of the conflict reveals that the Chinese People's Liberation Army made landfall on American soil, securing the Alaskan port of Valdez with a sudden strike at the US Army, who tries to take it back. Meanwhile, the Middle Eastern Coalition attacked the eastern coast and battled the US Army to take over the highways. MEC was able to fight their way from the beachhead landing in the Delaware Bay to Pennsylvania. This bold push is to cut off American units moving south to reinforce Washington, D.C., which is under siege by MEC forces. And the story of this conflict will actually be continued in Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, and those games will include single-player modes, but they will come out in a few years' time, and in the meantime, Battlefield is taking us 200 years forward.
So, in 2106, the world has frozen. After 100 years of debate and dissension, the world's governments were forced to face the reality of global warming. The next ice age had arrived. The new ice age began in the year 2106 as temperatures plumbed and a massive ice wall began to move south from the North Pole. By 2131, much of the northern hemisphere had been consumed by the cold, with the ice wall extending as far as Italy. The freezing cold consumed living space and resources in the north, forcing populations in these areas to attempt to migrate south. These mass migrations caused several conflicts to arise and old alliances to crumble across the globe. European Union fell into civil war between its members and nearly collapsed. The only way to survive the Ice Age was through some degree of cooperation, and 6 major coalitions were formed among the remaining nations. The European Union reorganized itself into a military coalition, while Russia formed a new Russo-Asian military alliance known as the Pan-Asian Coalition. The African nations, controlling a major portion of the remaining unfrozen land on Earth, formed the Union of African States. Despite the existential threat posed by the Ice Age, relations between European Union and PAC were in a poor state sometimes before the war. Both fractions were spying on each other. As the result, the European Union was able to capture Titan and Battle Walker technology from the PAC, and the PAC stolen a prototype Mk-15 Bandit from the European Union and used it to create the US-8 Ocelot. The combined effort of multiplied United States and European arms manufacturers would go on to create the SCAR-11, the standard issue rifle for the European Union in an upcoming war. The Union of African States became an important ally to the European Union, as the Union would supply much of Europe's energy and food through the joint projects. Those included Shuhia Taiba, a large-scale agricultural project located in the northern Egypt, and the Sidi power plant, which would provide more than 14% of the European Union population's energy by the year 2143. European Union troops would subsequently be stationed in northern Africa to assist the African Union in defense of those sites. By early 2138, around 10 billion people on Earth, the world's 6 superpowers, were heavily fortified, ready to fight over the remaining land and resources. The Pan-Asian coalition sets its sights on conquering Africa and the Mediterranean, expecting an invasion by PAC into the now agriculture-rich plains of North Africa. The European Union concentrated its resources along the Mediterranean, ready to assist the Union of African States. A diversion by 2 PAC battalions into Egypt seemed to confirm their suspicions, but the attacks were merely decoys, meant to distract the world from the PAC's primary objective for the first part of the war: to destroy the military might of the European Union's premier units still left in Europe. The Cold War began in October 2139, with coordinated PAC invasions from the Persian Gulf to the Baltic Sea. In November, as part of the Operation Canute, 3 battalions led by General Arkady Petrov entered Minsk, a key European Union command center in the northern Europe. The European Union Kriegspanzer 2nd Regiment fiercely defended the city for over 4 months until PAC Elite Central Command Group broke through their southern flank, forcing them to withdraw. The Battle of Minsk featured the first employment of the militarized Titan in combat operation, changing the nature of modern warfare forever. Because of the Titan's unmatched effectiveness as both a transport and assault medium, its destruction became a crucial component of military strategy. At Minsk alone, 6 full-scale Titans were destroyed within the first week of combat. In February 2140, a PAC X and 2nd Command divisions swept through Serbia and trapped the European Union 9th Armored Corps in the heart of Belgrade, with a massive ice wall blocking its retreat. The European Union force, inspired by General Emil Nikolai, staged a tensions resistance. In March, the PAC Northern Command Group arrived through recently annexed Bulgaria, led by a swift V-shaped formation of T-39 Bogatyr battle walkers. The PAC forces burst through the European Union eastern flank and forced their surrender. With control of Eastern Europe, the PAC turned its sights to the European Union's Central Command in Berlin. On July 10, 2140, as part of Operation Thunder, 15 squadrons of PAC gunships wrested control of the skies above eastern Germany. The victory allowed PAC Titans to airdrop entire regiments of the Northern Command Group behind the EU Brandenburg's Line. Expeditionary Force quickly capitulated. The path to Berlin was cleared. On August 15, the PAC waged an all-out offensive on the city. After 2 months of intense fighting, Berlin fell. The remaining EU forces retreated to France, where they would make a last stand before evacuating to Africa. By the end of 2140, the PAC occupied much of Europe, but had yet to gain control of the Mediterranean. Northern France represented a key strategic passage, but it was a narrow one, given the wall of ice that had advanced all the way to the 49th parallel. The PAC sped into Lorraine to find a small but resilient EU company holding a section of the Maginot Wall in Verdun. The T-8 Tiger main battle tank more than held its own against the newer Type 32 Nekomata Hoover tank, allowing the European Union to hold the position for almost a month. Despite being significantly outnumbered, the European Union forces at Verdun were able to severely deplete the invading PAC division. This effort was due to a large part of the European Union's ability to infiltrate and destroy PAC Titans before they could distribute troops and supplies to the front lines. Soon, the PAC matched those efforts, inflicting similar damage to their EU Titan counterparts. By 2142, Serber Landing was the last European Union stronghold on the European continent. The port served as the chief's defensive hub for the EU Northern Mediterranean operations. Tasked with seizing the harbor, PAC General Yuri Vladimirovich used commando units equipped with a new IT-33 optical camouflage to infiltrate the city. Once inside there, sabotage the defenses, allowing the general to land his forces in the main harbor. There, they faced the Hell Brigade, the EU premier infantry unit assigned to defend the city. The ensuing violence would establish Serber Landing as the most costly battle of the Cold War. The European Union forces have set their sights on the expanse in the Arabian Peninsula, once known as Highway Tampa. In a desperate attempt to keep their mechanized division operational in the European Union must claim the surviving oil resources and seize the only remaining harbor from the PAC control. Facing the loss of support from their Titan, the remaining PAC forces have taken refuge in Azio City. With the PAC having limited armor and few supplies, the European Union have set an offensive move from an infamous Azio bridgehead in the southeast. History books will call Operation Shingle the bloodiest battle in the European Union campaign, causing the greatest suffering and damage to the PAC forces. The attack on Camp Gibraltar was the first deception attack used by PAC to drive EU forces out of position. Although not of military significance, the site was an important standing point for refugees from the Western Mediterranean territories. On April 10, 2142, the PAC AA Command Division attacked the camp. The European Union's 4th and 5th Armored Battalions were tasked with defending Camp Gibraltar. The European Union Command relied on sniper tactics to hold key positions in an attempt to occupy the PAC forces as long as possible. By the end of 2142, freezing temperatures, mass migration, and warfare had rendered most of the Pac's occupied territories uninhabitable. Desperate to sustain its dwindling population, the PAC changed its military focus to capturing key energy, food, and water supplies. Shuhia Taiba, a large-scale European Union agricultural project located in northern Egypt, was one of the PAC primary targets. On November 11, a fleet of Titans carrying 6 PAC command divisions flew into the skies above. They were immediately greeted by the EU's Second Army. The resulting battle raged for more than a year. Both sides utilized more than 20 Titans between them. By the end of fighting a year later, only 2 remained. Continuous assaults rendered half of the capabilities useless by the first month. Years later, covered in metal carnage, Shuhia Taiba would be referred as the Titan Graveyard. In January 2143, the PAC tried to appropriate another key resource target in Egypt, the city power plant. The recently constructed facility provided more than 40% of the European Union's population's energy. With each coalition depleted from manpower and equipment, the battle began primarily as a ground war. The EU 3rd and 4th Infantry Divisions established 3 lines of defenses, fighting off wave after wave of incursions by PAC Special Forces. In March, armored and airborne divisions arrived for both sides. Within weeks, the fight intensified to become one of the largest and most fervent of the entire war. At the first, PAC utilized its depleted Titan fleet in its attack on the city power station. Soon, however, the ground war intensified. More air support and delivery was required. Within a month, the skies were again filled with Titans. As the PAC launched diversionary strikes from Italy into North Africa, it secretly gathered forces in the Sinai Peninsula to prepare for a full-scale assault on the continent. On May 1st, 4 PAC command divisions flew into Libya to engage the EU 6th Army Group. This left the 5th Corps of the Suez Canal without support when the Southern Command Group, led by General Munokoi, raced into Egypt. European Union forces staffed off Munokoi's army until help finally arrived via 10th Airborne Division. Had the PAC seized the Suez Canal, it would have severely compromised the European Union's ability to defend Africa. To attack the European Union's Suez Canal position, the PAC relied on a Titan squadron to transport assets into the field battle. Similarly, the EU employed their own Titan fleet to transfer divisions from the other posts in northern Africa. While conflict raged on the ground, a secondary battle ensued in the skies as both sides attempted to airborne delivery of reinforcements. In an attempt to stop the flow of European Union reinforcements to the Suez Canal, the PAC launched a series of raids against key transportation hubs. The most vital of those targets were Tunis Harbor. Fog in the Strait of Sicily allowed the PAC to land its 8th Command Regiment almost on top of the harbor defenses. This strategy enabled them to pin the EU forces into the harbor with the Mediterranean at their backs. The Valkyrie Brigade formed the backbone of the European Union's defense with their company of L5 Racing battlewalkers. In 2144, European Union forces established a secret Titan repair and rearmament base on Wake Island with the intent of dividing PAC forces and their supply lines from the east and west of their location. The constructions of the base went undetected until PAC satellites detected military activity in the region and in response sent in their forces to put an end to the European Union occupation and its plans. In the early years of 2145, Earth was freezing rapidly. All the remaining zones of the planet became heated battlegrounds. The most explosive battle of all was focused in the Hawaiian Islands. Known for its lush environments, the islands have now turned mostly to large pieces of rock. It is here on the rock of Molokai that we'll experience the largest engagement in the entire conflict. A few years into the most desperate struggle in the history of mankind, and with the conflict focused around the Mediterranean and Pan-Asian coalition, seized the chance to claim the undefeated natural resources beneath the ice of mainland Europe. By the time of EU is aware of their presence, the enemy is firmly entrenched in the continent's harsh ice fields, among abandoned city ruins. As the European counter-attack progressed through Germany, the Rhine once again became a crucial defensive line. The ice valley created by a frozen river had turned into an almost impassable barrier of broken ice. In the 7th March of 2145, exactly 200 years to the day that 9th US Armed Division crossed Remagen Bridge during the World War II, the European forces launched a bold attack across the ice fields in hope of establishing a foothold in the eastern shores of the Rhine. Port Bavaria was originally part of the network of Titan supply stations spread throughout Europe. As the PAC army advanced in the year 2142, those stations crumbled, one after another, to the PAC forces. In 2145, the port had become the central supply station for PAC Titans patrolling the European continent. As such, it was vital for any counterattack to take control of the station and cripple PAC supply lines. By the late summer of 2145, the EU had managed to push the PAC back through Western Europe, and now the heartlands of old Eastern Germany and the state of Saxony lay before them. As the Arctic winter, which prohibited any troop movement with its freezing temperatures and harsh weather conditions, drew closer, the Central European High Command ordered their armies to attack the city of Leipzig, the last stronghold of the PAC forces in Europe. Under the cover of darkness, the European Union began to infiltrate the frozen labyrinth of buildings. The European Union forces have pushed east, where PAC forces have gathered to make a defensive stand against the enemy. As the main road into PAC territory, this region is a critical location for both armies. European Union intelligence have reported the location of a PAC Titan manufacturing plant hidden away from the front lines in the region known as Karkland. The European Union forces have a chance to severely impact a PAC war effort by taking control of the region and the Titan factory within. In the year 2147, Earth's natural resources are dwindling. Across the globe, PAC and European forces have been exchanging fire in an attempt to secure those valuable supplies. The most important location of all, the diamond mines. Those are the last known operating mines in the world. Without those diamonds, the ability to operate on armies would be lost. And this is it, this is what we get from the scenario's descriptions, and we don't really know how the game ends. Maybe it will be explained in the future titles.
Now back to the present days, as in 2008, Battlefield Bad Company is released.
Welcome to the 222nd Army Battalion, the B company made of rejects from other companies that were too valuable just to let them go. They call it Bad Company. Preston Marlowe, instead of going to jail, was transferred right here. This is his first day, so he meets Sweetwater, Haggard and Sarge Redford, who is the leader of the team. The team is ordered to go ahead of the convoy and scout the terrain, but this convoy is ambushed. Their vehicle is busted, so Marlowe is ordered to fix it. Then they take over the Russian artillery base. They also use enemy artillery guns to help the convoy. And they secure the alternative way for the convoy as the bridge was destroyed. Later they are sent to take over a nearby farm, and all of a sudden a tank pops out of the garage and starts to grill the team. Luckily, Marlowe finds a rocket launcher and destroys the tank, earning some respect from his new friends. While the boys are waiting for the helicopter to pick them up, the machine is shot down and crashes, so the headquarters sent them to clear the anti-air base. They pick up some C4 explosives on their way and blow up the guns. Next task, go after the supply truck that was spotted earlier, which leads them to another farm held by the Russians. Team overtakes it, so the convoy now can pass safely. Well, not exactly, as very soon it's attacked by artillery again. This time headquarters give them air support, but since the enemy is jamming Air Force weapon systems, Bad Company needs to find and destroy the radar jammers. C4 again does the job, and when the radar base is taken down, Air Force enters the stage and Juno convoy is rolling again. Then the team is sent to clear the remaining enemies. Haggard and Sweetwater suspect they might not be Russians. Then Sweetwater vanishes for a while, and what he finds is a dead mercenary. He's one of the legionaries, which some say might be the most deadly army in the world. They also find gold on him, and the rumor has it that this army pays in gold. After a little brainstorm, boys decide to keep a small amount of gold for themselves. They fly to Zabograd, where the US Army is launching an offensive. This is Sarge Redford's last day of duty. They find some mercenary symbols in one of the houses and a case full of gold. Their mission is to cut off Russian supply lines before they get to the place by hitting weapon depots and taking down the fuel dump. Then, Redfield is informed that Russians are coming for the bridge and the team needs to secure it. Redfield asks for air support but doesn't get any, so they need to use the Russian mortar guiding system they found. And yeah, that works like a charm. Bad Company is informed that Zabograd offensive has started, so they go to the city and take down the Russian defensive positions. And Marlowe is still using the Russian mortar guiding system. When they reach the beach, they meet Armor Division. US tanks arrived and it's time for the final push for the Zabograd. Bad Company is responsible for protecting the tanks on their way for the final offensive to take over the city. Then they are sent to find the Zabograd command force and cut their communications so they can't call reinforcements. Redfield is informed that if they succeed, this might be a game changer in the battle and the team might be even released from Bad Company. Of course they do the job, but it turns out it was too late, as the backup was called before they accomplished their mission. Now their new priority is to protect the tank in the city square that got stuck under a heavy enemy fire. They cover it until the US reinforcements arrive. As enemy is evacuating their weapons, it's time to push for the harbor. Looking at the mercenaries leaving, Sweetwater is hoping that all the hard work will pay off and they will be released from the company. Redfield and Haggard figured that they should capture some of the mercenaries for questioning. And though Sweetwater thinks it's madness, Redfield actually gives this idea a green light. Soon they reach the leaving trucks, but they are already on their way, and there's a gold bar dropping from one of the trucks. So boys decide to use a shortcut to follow them, and they find a place they were heading. But this is a borderline, so they can't follow them further. Or can they? Actually, Haggard decides just to go there, and though it's a neutral zone, Redfield decides to follow him. After a heavy fight, everyone is okay, and Haggard doesn't give a single F that he basically invaded an independent country because he was hoping to get the gold from the trucks. Now headquarters needs an explanation, so Sarge covers Haggard and says that they had to do it. I guess it's not gonna be his last day of duty, since they will probably be facing court-martial for what they did. Angry Sarge now decides that they should go for the gold and at least get something out of this whole war. So, they go. First they blow up the antennas so they can't be tracked. Then they drive under heavy firing from air and ground. They reach a base and Marlowe takes down the helicopter. They get to the tank and go for the gold that they believe is located in the facility nearby. The place is highly protected by mercenaries from the Legionnaires' army, so the boys are sure that they must keep their gold here. But soon, the US Army arrives and surrounds the bad company, so they have no other way but to give up.
The least of my problems. Dropping the soap is what I'm worried about. I hate that. It's all mushy.
But instead of throwing them to prison, the army decided that while they invaded the neutral territory anyway, they may as well be used to look around, as the US command is suspicious about the Surdanistan country hiding some weapons. So, before they knew it, Bad Company was back in action and on their way to find this guy Zavomir Sedal, who is a local dictator suspected playing both sides on this war. While they are checking out the terrain from the hill, their helicopter gets shut down. So I guess there goes the neutral Saduristan. First thing first, they go for the missile launchers. Now time to go to Sedal's palace. Tank is a very comfortable ride, but the enemy destroyed the bridge, so they have to leave it and go by foot. On the other side, they hear a president speaking through the speakers, calling for help. At least that's what Sweetwater understood and translated. Bad Company goes to the palace and secures the place. Inside, they found a vault with Zavomir Sedal inside. After a cute little chit-chat, the president goes back to playing golf, and the command orders to leave him as distraction is denied. Plus, at this point, Bad Company is cut loose on the enemy territory, and they are on their own. But the president offers help, as he kinda wanna exile from here anyway, because he actually is kept in captivity by legionnaires, as he did not pay them enough for their services. So, they hoop into a pimped presidential golden chopper and fly away. Bad Company flies over the river, destroying enemy facilities and units. While refueling, the president informs the team that they are heading to the Russian border. And that is not exactly where the company wants to go, so they decide to drop the dictator and go for the gold. And it turns out that Sedal knows and he wants to make a deal. But before they seal it, they are attacked by helicopter and crash down.
About the black chopper coming up behind us.
What? Shit! Marlowe! Turn her around!
Marlowe wakes up alone behind enemy lines. He manages to contact command through the radio, but he can't get any help, as their whole operation in Saduristan was unofficial. But the woman who is called Miss July, that leads them through the radio all the way, promises she'll figure something out. Turns out Marlowe is in Russia. He gets a hint that he should look for the rest in the nearby village. He spots a crushed helicopter and searches for the boys, but they are not in there. And Miss July informs that according to the heat maps, they probably were transferred. She tells him to find a communication hub deep in the valley. Marlowe steals a motorboat and takes the way through the river. He enters the facility and finds a security cam room where he sees the president being investigated, but when the guy who threatens him spots the camera, he shoots it. Miss July tells Marlowe to go to monastery. There he finds the rest of the squad who don't really look like they needed to be rescued. Bad Company decides to look for president, as he must help them to find the gold. Miss July is happy that the boys reunited and gives them info where to look for the dictator. Zavomir Sedal is spotted near his golden helicopter talking to the man who threatened him earlier. The man in black tells the president that since he has no gold, he will just take his country instead. And the dictator is like, "Yeah, sure, no problem, my friend, the best country for you, my friend. I'm going to exile and the country is yours." But the legionaries' leader orders to execute him and flies away. Time for Bad Company to step in and save his presidential ass. Then they take a boat and escape. Sedal leads them to the Cadiz port, where the gold is supposed to be. It's an unfinished city that was planned to be a paradise for tourists. And this is where Zavomir gets his exile, on his own private island. Well, at least he has a toilet. Boys secure the beach and contact Miss July. Redfield tells her the truth about the gold and she's like, well, don't forget about my part of share. She also informs that US assault is coming to their position soon. Haggard says they need to stop them if they want to get their hands on the gold, so they try to sabotage their passage by blowing up the bridges. Haggard and Marlowe are sent to distract the enemies and Sweetwater and Redfield go to look for gold. While playing cat and mouse with the mercenaries, they came across the treasure they were seeking. But the trouble with the gold is always the same. Finding it, it's just a halfway of getting it. Since it's not that easy to carry a ton of metal, especially when you're under a heavy air assault. Marlowe makes his way to the anti-aircraft gear and shuts down the helicopter. Not bad for a new guy, and it's time to finally collect the reward. Well, not really, since the US Army is already securing the place. While the disappointed Bad Company walks away, officer spots them and orders them to take one of the trucks and follow the convoy. And we both know they're not gonna follow it for too long. But before I'll make my signature ending, there's one more scene showing the mercenaries leader surviving the helicopter crash, and boy, this guy looks so much like Nico from GTA 4, right? And that's how the game ends. Battlefield Bad Company starts in 1944 with a group of US commandos being sent into Japan to extract a Japanese scientist with war-decisive information before atom bombs are dropped on Japan. This operation is called Aurora. The team approaches the coast with a motorboat under the shadow of the night. They get stopped by guards in a bunker and one of two teams is killed, with the other one managing to avoid enemy fire and swim their way to the beach. Soon the bombing starts and commandos use the distraction to sneak on Japanese trenches, and through the jungle they get to the meeting point where they meet the Japanese scientist they are supposed to save. This guy is actually terrified and he says something about black weapon. But no time to waste, so they move on and reach the airfield. Then they make it to the submarine dock where they steal one of the Japanese subs. While moving away from the coast, they see a huge explosion behind a mountain, and it produces a shockwave so massive that they are swept. And we don't really know if they were able to survive, but probably not. And what we just saw was the black weapon. Back in the present day, Bad Company is in Russia to back up the US counterintelligence. It's supposed to be their last mission as a B company, but we all know that's not true, right? And if you want to get to know B Company a little better, watch this video where I explain what happened in the first part of the game. Anyway, Company sneaks through the forest and gets to the meeting point, but the agent they were supposed to meet gets captured and this bold guy kills him cold-blooded and flies away. Bad Company gets orders to secure the vehicle, so they take over enemy positions and defend it until air support shows up and helps them deal with the tank. They manage to capture the high-valued vehicle and take it for a ride. Russians try to chase them, but Marlowe takes the position on the back of a truck and uses a grenade launcher to lose the tail. But soon a helicopter shows up and fires missiles on them that make the truck crash. Luckily everyone is okay and the cargo they were after is also there. They decide to take a little peek on what's inside the box. And oh yeah, it's probably one of those black weapon warheads from the prologue. But since it's no gold, they take it to the command and it turns out this one is actually fake. Anyway, the officer tells them that Russians are building a weapon and it looks pretty scary. They need to act and they need to act fast, so that way Bad Company gets another chance to earn their freedom if they do the job. First, they need to go to Bolivia and find a guy named Aguirre to deliver him a flash drive. While flying over Bolivian jungle, boys meet their new pilot Flynn. He acts a bit weird, but he sure knows how to handle RPG missile. Flynn drops the Bad Company right in the middle of the jungle, and instead of Aguirre, they only find some dead bodies. Looks like Aguirre was able to escape the captivity and left some clues. Bad Company decides to go up the river. They take the boat and try to keep the low profile, but they have this feeling that someone is watching them, and soon they are ambushed by a paramilitary mercenaries. After dealing with them, they reach a bigger mercenary camp. First, they take down the guard on the tower, and then Marlowe uses a sniper rifle to clear the way for the rest. He takes advantage of the storm and uses thunders to cover the noise of the rifle so the enemy has no idea what's going on. but still no sign of Aguirre, so they need to go further through the jungle and finally reach the place where they actually spot Aguirre being escorted by guards. This place looks highly defended and soon Russian choppers shows up in the sky. Bad Company engages the camp and progresses, pushing back the enemy, although they are highly outnumbered and also attacked by some armed vehicles. Marlowe uses an RPG to blow up the enemy tank, but boys need to move fast since the Russian chopper is already approaching the landing zone to pick up Aguirre. Marlowe manages to shoot the guy who held him, and that's how they rescue him. Aguirre just looks at the flash drive and he instantly knows what's going on. He explains to Bad Company that a couple months ago they set up a relay off an old French weather satellite and hooked it into Georgian mainland. That way they gathered a lot of information and also learned about the dummy weapon. Bad news is that those mercenaries have stolen all the intel they had, so to get it back they need to fly on the top of the mountains. They found a base there and machine gun it from the air to clear the space for landing. Then they run around searching for the stolen data. Finally they reach the satellite station. Though it's quite easy to hack the place, they still need to get the data server from inside the satellite, so Sweetwater codes the satellite to crash. The wind is too strong for Flynn to give them a ride, so they need to jump into a jeep. On the way they deal with enemy armored trucks and choppers, but manage to reach the place in one piece, just in time for the fireworks. Then they secure the black box and the weather is getting really arctic, so Marlowe gets lost in the snowstorm. Actually everyone got lost, and Marlowe gets the info that Russians are searching the area, so he needs to reach Sarge before they pin him or he freezes his ass off. He manages to reach the village where Ghost Rider is waiting to pick him up. When they reach safety, Aguirre explains to Bad Company that what they are dealing with is a scalar weapon. Haggard is impressed listening to how it works, and long story short, it creates a powerful electromagnetic pulses, so used the right way, it could cut off the power in like the whole USA for instance. Russians plan to do this, put the country into a chaos and then start an invasion. So to prevent that from happening, Bad Company needs to find Arkady Kirilenko, who is behind this project. It's actually the bald guy they encountered earlier in the jungle. Of course, they could just report it into the comment and leave catching Kirilenko to them, and actually that's Sarge's first thought, but all of a sudden the rest of the team gets into the red, white and blue saving the country vibe, as they kinda blame themselves for not handling this guy when they had a chance. And since B Company always respected the democracy, they have a vote and decide to finish what they started. They go to Chile, where they get some tank support from Aguirre and intel about Kirilenko's last known position. First they destroy some ECA radars on their way to clear the sky for later. Then they destroy some enemy tow launchers and vehicles waiting for them on the next hill. Marlowe uses UAV station that does the job nice and smooth. With the air clear, B Company can use the air support, so Marlowe attacks the target buildings in the city. After that, they go through the city to search for Kirilenko. Town is basically ruined at this point, but still some enemies hide on the rooftops and buildings, so the team needs to fight their way to the place they believe their target is hiding. And finally, they find this guy. That's not Kirilenko at all, but this bad boy has a quite liberal policy when it comes to trading information about his body, so Bad Company hangs a new carrot on a stick and progresses after their target. Boys drive Humvees and it gets pretty smooth until they are ambushed on the bridge. They manage to get to the other side, but it was just a welcoming committee, and soon they encounter even harder resistance from the enemy. Looks like Kirilenko can be really close, judging on the numbers of men and gear sent to stop Bad Company, but with the air support, nothing is impossible. Meanwhile, the team receives an info that Southern Command is planning to lay some heavy ordnance down soon, so they must find Kirilenko like real quick. But before they even know, the bombing starts and the whole place becomes a Devil's Sunday barbecue. Sarge spots the drainage tunnel and it leads straight to Kirilenko. They find a shipping manifest of the ship, the Sangre del Toro. Kirilenko knows Aguirre sent them, and he actually gives a short admiration speech about the whole plan they had to catch him. But it gets interrupted by an explosion. Kirilenko uses the distraction to escape, and Flynn shows up to pick up the boys. Aguirre explains that Sangre del Toro is a ship that went missing and now somehow it's in the middle of a desert. And no one knows how to get there and what's really on it. Hagar spots the jeep and Boyce decides to steal it. The driver runs away to a nearby outpost. Turns out Kirilenko's men are also trying to find Sangre del Toro. Bad Company takes over a nearby stronghold and Haggard plugs into a computer found there and finds coordinates of the ship. So the rest grabs a jeep and drives through desert and finds it. Marlowe explores the wreckage and finds documents about Aurora operation from 1943. Turns out it was a suicide mission and Command knew they were sending those men for a sure death. They just wanted to see what the weapon could do. Marlowe also finds a strange piece of gear. So the boys fly to meet Aguirre and show him the goods. All of a sudden they get hit by javelin and the weapon falls down, but Marlowe jumps and grabs it. Boys land somewhere in the Colombian jungle. Marlowe finds Sweetwater hiding in one of the huts. Soon enemies come to look for them, so Marlowe gets a sniper spot and manages to survive the heavy enemy attack. They rejoin the rest of the team and are ordered to leave their pilot behind and deliver the compound to the new destruction point. But we both know they're not gonna do that, so they just go and search for Flynn. Marlowe finds him being interrogated in the POV camp, but a guerrilla member sneaks on him and almost stabs him with a knife, but Flynn manages to reach for the gun and shoots the guy. Then they steal some quad bikes and hit the road. They reach a helicopter and manage to fly away, but they are still chased by enemy choppers and RPGs. So Marlowe takes the machine gun and makes some holes here and there, while Flynn flies between some high mountain terrain, and finally they reach the meeting point with Aguirre. But it turns out that Kirilenko shows up there, and Aguirre is actually on his side. He even tries to give them an explanation, but Haggard tells him to cut the crap and points out that he reacted weird when he heard the name of one of the soldiers killed in action on a mission back in 40s, and this guy had a son and Aguirre actually fits his age. So when he found out that the government sent his father on a suicide mission, he kinda lost his nerve and changed sides. Aguirre admits it's true, but moments later, Kirilenko just kills him, because I guess that's how he rolls. Thankfully, Flynn shows up and helps B Company by shooting the enemies, but unfortunately his helicopter got a straight hit from a javelin and there's no way he could survive that, so I guess he sacrificed himself to buy Company some time to escape. So Flynn is dead, Aguirre is dead, and the weapon component is in the Russian hands. Things are not looking good. Bad Company spots one of the mercenaries in the jungle and Marlowe takes him down and gets his radio. Turns out Kirilenko is heading to the harbor, and this might be the last chance to stop this maniac. But to get there, boys need to take a walk through this Venezuelan city, and it's a total war zone. Russians battling US army everywhere, choppers, attacks from above, bombs dropping on the city, and also they hear this disturbing sound from time to time. Soon the US army sends some air support and the team reaches the coast. They spot a glowing plane in the distance, and a few seconds later a huge explosion blows everything away. And actually that ends the battle. So when they see what they are dealing with, Haggard and Sweetwater kinda lose their motivation, but Marlowe tries to give them a speech and Sarge takes his side, convincing the other two to step up for the final challenge and save the USA from Russian invasion. So they get closer to the plane and it turns out it's a big-ass plane that can carry tons of equipment. And the way this weapon works is actually makes the ground zero safe from the explosion, so that's how it didn't blow up during the big boom earlier. There's no other way, so the boys decide to hijack the plane. Through the servers they manage to reach the landing zone and they jump on board in the last second. While inside they quickly progress through the cargo deck, but finally they reach a bulletproof window, so they decide to take the other path and take over the cockpit. They believe they will find Kirilenko there, but when they actually reach the place, he is not there. At this point the plane is getting near Texas, and Kirilenko starts speaking to them through the radio. He reveals that the compound they found on the ship is used to generate the shield that protects the plane from the explosion. He is hiding behind bulletproof glass, and blowing it up might destroy the plane, and that basically means suicide. But bad company is like, yeah, screw it. And they just go there, place a C4 on the glass, make a hole in it, and destroy the weapon by just shooting at it. Of course, the plane gets damaged and starts falling down, so everyone jumps out of the plane and Marlow kills Kirilenko, while everyone is skydiving. Back on the ground, mission completed, and it looks like Bad Company will finally be released. They are already making some plans, but the officer shows up, and guess what? They are still needed, as the Russians are actually invading the US soil through Alaska. And that's how the game ends.
Around that time also Battlefield 1943 and Battlefield Heroes were released, but those are straight multiplayer games with no background story whatsoever. So let's go back to the modern conflict introduced in Battlefield 2, with Battlefield 3 and 4 expanding it in single player storylines.
Game starts in New York City. We see a man running away from police. He jumps on a train that enters the tunnel. As he jumps through the window, it turns out the train is filled with terrorists, and we can see that he is wearing handcuffs. He goes through the train eliminating terrorists until he spots one placing C4 on the door. He tries to get to him through the window, but he gets shot and almost falls down. When he gets back on the train roof, another explosion takes place, and that opens a hole back into the train. Soon, the man gets ambushed by the same guy. Next thing we see Sergeant Blackburn being interrogated about the terrorist attack planned in New York for today. Blackburn recognizes a guy named Solomon in the picture and says he is the one who is planning the attack. But actually, it turns out that the agents suspect him of somehow being involved in the hostile terrorist operation planned by Solomon. Blackburn confesses he met Solomon 9 months ago during the Operation Soulbreaker in Kurdistan. His mission was to search for the missing Viper squad investigating an improvised explosive device in Iraqi Kurdistan. Viper's last known position was in territory controlled by the People's Liberation and Resistance, an Iranian paramilitary group, and soon they get ambushed by PLR. They push back the enemy, and while looking for the Viper squad, Blackburn is sent to secure an IED site, but he gets sneaked from behind by one of the terrorists and struggles to push him off. He manages to beat him and cuts the wire right before the explosive set by terrorists exploded. Back on the streets, Blackburn's squad fights to clear the landing zone for extraction, but during the battle, there is an earthquake and one of the buildings collapses, falling down on the chopper, knocking down Blackburn for a few hours. When he wakes up, he is injured and he sees Solomon taking the another injured Marine and then ordering one of his men to take him away. A few hours later, Blackburn manages to get out of the ruins. He sneaks through the streets as PLR patrols are searching for American soldiers everywhere. On the way to the extraction point, he meets Montes, and together they get on a plane and leave the place. Turns out PLR used the chaos caused by an earthquake to overthrow the Iraqi government. In reaction, the US sent 50,000 soldiers to Kurdistan, and that triggered a war in the whole region. Then Blackburn is asked about al-Bashir and Lieutenant Colby Hawkins. He says he doesn't know her. Then we see Jennifer Colby Hawkins being informed about change of plans and receiving an immediate launch orders. She learns that it's going to be a strike mission over Tehran to take down al-Bashir. Jennifer gets on her F-18. Very soon her squadron is attacked by enemy fighters, and the other plane got shot down. But Jennifer manages to shoot down enemy fighters and helps in taking over the base. But turns out, al-Bashir wasn't there. Agents are very suspicious, and Blackburn is asked about his knowledge of al-Bashir connection with Solomon. And things get a little bit tense when one of the agents starts pushing Blackburn and blaming him for the death of his commanding officer. Then they ask him about the nuke he found in Tehran. Well, his team was sent to capture enemy structures strategic for the intelligence. They storm the apartment complex, then they use the Humvee to move to the financial district. They get ambushed by an enemy on the highway, but they received a warning earlier, so they are prepared to push them back. Then Blackburn proceeds to the bank building, and while the rest is fighting to take over the place, Blackburn sneaks through the fire stairs and enters through the window, surprising terrorists inside. When the building is secured, officers are ordered to look for al-Bashir. They go for the underground vault, and it turns out it's very well protected. They manage to get inside, and it's filled with money and documents about current PLR operations. Soldiers also find a Russian portable nuke, but the bad news is the case used to contain 3 of those, and there's only 1 inside. Suddenly, al-Bashir pops up on the monitor. Turns out, he and his men are heading into the vault, so soldiers decide to secure the nuke and escape as soon as possible, and the building looks like it's gonna collapse very soon. Back in the interrogation, Agent asks about the other nukes and Blackburn says one is already here in New York. Agents ask about Paris and Blackburn gets stressed. They show him pictures of Dmitry Mayakovsky, aka Dima, assuming Blackburn knows him and he knows why he was in Paris. Blackburn wants to know what happened in Paris, but agents tell him only Mayakovsky knows what really happened there. Then we see Dima in car with 2 other Russians, and one of them says he hopes the American will do what he has to do in New York. Looks like their objective is to capture the nuke before it detonates, even if that means killing police officers. Soon they activate a jammer to prevent Solomon from detonating the nuke from the distance. Then they storm the building filled with terrorists, and through the parking lot they progress upstairs to the offices and enter a main room getting close to their target. But terrorists start to escape with the nuke. They run outside and escape through the streets, where they have to fight the French police who don't differentiate them from the terrorists and just shoots everybody. And that chase turns into a regular battle in the middle of the city. A helicopter gets shot down, crashing on the building, and one of the terrorists uses an RPG, and that actually kills one of Dima's friends. The guy with the nuke escapes to the train station, and there he jumps on Dima at the entrance to the platform. Dima manages to handle him and throws his ass under the train, but turns out the bag he left contains a dummy, not a real nuke. And a few seconds later, we hear an explosion, and a blinding lightning comes after very soon. The nuke was detonated in the other part of the city. Agents show Blackburn what happened in Paris, informing him there were 80,000 casualties. Blackburn explains he tries to stop Solomon from doing the same in New York. Agent points out that a Russian ex-Spetsnaz being in Paris at the same time that the nuke was blasted makes it kinda look like Russians did it, and Dima was sent by them to detonate the nuke. Blackburn tries to explain that Dima was there to stop it. Then agents mention Miller, and Blackburn says that back in the Kurdistan they sent a distress code and Miller came to get them. We see Sergeant Miller on a tank advancing through the highway, fighting enemy forces on the way to Tehran. They push forward through the streets to get to Blackburn, who is waiting for backup in the bank building. Unfortunately, Miller unit gets hit by a missile and gets stuck. While they try to hold on waiting for air support, they got caught from behind by PLR. Miller gets captured and he wakes up in a room with Solomon and al-Bashir, and they record a video with Miller's execution. Agents show the video to Blackburn saying it doesn't connect Solomon with nukes. And again he tries to explain, no, that's exactly what it does. But since the bank building was destroyed and Miller got killed, there's no real evidence or anyone who could confirm his version. At the same time, they receive a call confirming that one of Solomon's known fake ID aliases was registered arriving in New York. And all of a sudden, Blackburn's version is starting to make more sense. Then he tells the story when he was sent to take down al-Bashir. He was a part of an assault team on a stealth mission during the night. They sneaked through the buildings and found a room where Miller was executed. Then they went to the location where they believed al-Bashir is right now. And when they got close, they saw al-Bashir trying to escape with a car, but they shoot the car and make him crash the vehicle. So they grab him and take him out of the street, calling for backup and waiting for evacuation. And turns out Bashir got badly injured due to the accident. Blackburn manages to take him to a safe location at the mall and takes a defensive position until they got evacuated. Al-Bashir's condition is getting worse and he gets delusional, saying different things in agony. He speaks how Solomon must have betrayed him and betrayed his location, and that he also was the one who stole the bombs, and he reveals and warns Blackburn that on the 4th day of this month he plans to strike, and then he passes away. Agents show Blackburn's Bashir's phone containing information about a Russian arms dealer Kafarov connected to al-Bashir. After al-Bashir's death, he was believed to be the one who had stolen the nukes. Blackburn tells how they tried to capture Kafarov in his villa on the Caspian Sea coast near the Azerbaijani border. However, they run into a Russian paratrooper battalion also after Kafarov, and they were forced to fight them. In the chaos of the battle, Blackburn's squad mates Campo and Matkovich are killed by Russian air attack, and actually one of the agents showed compassion for Blackburn's loss, but soon he turns it over into anger again, accusing him of turning on his bodies for the enemy. Blackburn tries to explain the Russians were not the enemies in this one, and the other agent points out to Blackburn that Dima was also in Iran with a similar mission targeting Kafarov's villa. Actually, they succeeded in raiding Kafarov's place. They take down Kafarov's security and chase him while he tries to fly away with a chopper. Dima jumps on it on the last second and he starts to fight with Kafarov. During that fight they both fall down, but luckily for them they land in a pool. Kafarov tries to bribe the team, but he gets bitten by Dima. Dealer swears that he doesn't have the nukes and he will reveal everything if they let him go. When Blackburn arrives at the villa with his team, they split up to search the place. Soon he finds Dima with a deceased Kafarov. Dima takes him at the gunpoint, saying that Kafarov stole the nukes from Russians and sold them to Solomon. He used PLR to get them and plans to attack in Paris and New York. Dima explains that the two of them can prevail the war between their nations. Then he hears an American commanding officer is coming and he gives up and asks Blackburn to kill him to prevent the war that would cause millions of people death. And Blackburn decides to shoot his CO down. And by confessing that, Blackburn actually admitted he shot an American soldier under the influence of a Russian special agent. That doesn't sound good. He is told he was played by Dima and Russians, who were secretly behind the whole operation, just using him as a puppet. But Blackburn still insists on his version of the story though. But since there is no real evidence of the third nuke's existence, and anyone who could back up his version is dead, they still consider him as a traitor. Well, there's Montes, who also was there, but he only saw Blackburn killing the CO, and he has to confirm that, because that's what he saw. And this confession actually proves a version where Dima fooled Blackburn and escaped to Paris to blast the nuke there. One of the agents tells him that Solomon actually works for the US government, and for years he has been cooperating and was put close to al-Bashir on purpose. So that's why no one believes Blackburn. As the interrogators leave the room, they receive a call about a hijacked train in New York. Blackburn realizes he must act. Looking at the train map, he also spots that the train Solomon will use for attack will pass a nearby bridge very soon. He convinces Montes to help him. When agents get back to the room, they attack them and manage to cut loose. They jump out of the building and run on a bridge, jumping on the train roof. And that gets us back to the scene from the beginning of the story. So, fast forward to the moment he got knocked by Solomon. Well, he actually manages to strike back and grabs the other terrorist with the detonator and causes the explosion that crushes the train. Blackburn chases Solomon through the sewers and back on the street. Meanwhile, Montes picks him up with a car and they pursue Solomon until both their cars crush each other. Well, everyone is a little injured, but Solomon stands up and kills Montes. He also tries to shoot Blackburn, but he has no bullets left. Blackburn uses the moment of destruction to hit him and handcuffed their hands together. They struggle until Blackburn spots a brick and uses it to knock down Solomon. Then he secures the nuke. After that we see Dima drinking alone. He is affected with the radiation and writes down his version of the story that actually backups what Blackburn was saying and clears his name. He also justifies their actions in the name of a greater cause. But when he finishes, he takes a gun, and at the same time, he hears knocking on the door. Fade out, and we don't really know what happened. That's how the game ends.
Game starts underwater with Pac whining that he doesn't want to die listening to Total Eclipse of the Heart by Bonnie Tyler. Turns out he's stuck in a car with Irish Don and Wrecker. Don is injured, so he sacrifices himself that the rest could get out. Then we see what happened earlier. They are in Baku. Wrecker is running away from enemy soldiers. When he meets others in the safe house, it turns out those soldiers are actually Russian spec ops. Soon Irish shows up with enemies chasing him, so the rest covers him from the windows. Then they try to reach the extraction point, but the place is filled with enemies. When they get on the roof, they are attacked by a chopper. They almost make it to the extraction, but the ride gets hit and crashes. Whole building starts collapsing and they fall down. Irish helps Wrecker to get back on his feet. Don gets stuck and he is injured. Irish managed to steal a civilian car while Wrecker had to cut Don's leg to actually get him out. Enemy chopper is back, so they quickly get into the car and try to escape. While they try to reach the secondary extraction point, they get hit by a missile and crash into the ocean. While they try to get out of the water, we hear a conversation between Oracle and Garrison, who informs that Tombstone, which is the name of the team we just met, retrieved the intel confirming that in the event of a war between China and USA, Russia will be loyal to Admiral Chang. And the situation in China doesn't look good as people are rioting on the streets and Russians are already getting involved there. Oracle responded that they need to lock down Suez Canal. In Shanghai, Garrison explains that people are mad about the assassination of Jin Jie, who was a pro-democratic candidate for a new president. Admiral Chang convinced people that USA was behind Jie's death and that caused the riots all over the country. Soldiers are informed that if their operation blows up, Chang will have a reason to trigger a war. Team is sent to ZU Towers to secure some VIPs. Extraction is coordinated by Laszlo Kovic, who is a special agent working undercover. Wrecker is a new leader now since Don is dead. On the way to the building, they are attacked by an angry crowd and they have to leave the van. They sneak into the hotel but get spotted while trying to get to the VIPs and a shootout breaks out. That blows their cover, but they manage to find Kovic and the two VIPs, a woman named Hannah and her husband. The man is seriously injured and his face is covered in bandage. They decide to go on the roof and fly away with a stolen chopper. While they try to get on board, Hannah's husband gets shot and turns out there are many enemies approaching them right now. Wrecker and the others cover the helicopter with Kovic and VIPs, but they need to find another way to escape from this place. Garrison gives them 30 minutes to get to the ship, otherwise they're leaving without them. So they go through the Shanghai streets filled with soldiers and rioting mob. Turns out the soldiers are shooting civilians now and the place is out of control. On the way they meet two civilians hiding from Chang's forces in one of the buildings. They say Chang's tanks are blocking every exit from the city. Team manages to destroy a tank patrolling the park and gains access to the river. They get on civilian boats and are on their way out while the EMP blast blocks out everything. Irish decides they need to help all the civilians to get to USS Valkyrie. With the help from the US military, a few hundred Chinese civilians are saved. On board, an injured VIP needs to get a CT scan, but most of the medical equipment is down after the EMP blast, so they need to reach USS Titan and use their facilities. Wrecker and Irish are on the way to meet Garrison while the red alert is activated. Turns out Titan was destroyed. Garrison sends Tombstone unit on the sinking Titan to search for intel and survivors and makes Kovic their new leader. On USS Titan, they look for the damage control center. They don't have much time since the ship is sinking. Irish argues with Kovic as they found survivors, but he says to ignore them as they don't have gear to get them out and focus on reaching the data before it's too late. At one point, Irish even hits Kovic with his gun, but he can't do much more. And the lattice won't open. The trapped sailor tells Kovic he was locked here on purpose, but he doesn't know who did it.
Wrecker finds the data and Kovic takes it, but it turns out there are enemies on the ship, so Thompson needs to fight their way out. Soon enemy air forces shows up and attacks US ships. The whole thing turns into a regular battle and Thompson gets on their boat and fight the enemy patrol boats trying to get back to Valkyrie. Turns out Valkyrie is already being invaded by Chinese soldiers. They push to get to the bridge since Garrison is not responding on the radio. When they get there, they see Hana being attacked by Chinese soldiers. Turns out she actually handles them really good. She tells Kovic that Garrison ordered to relocate her husband. Kovic gets angry and she tells him Garrison didn't know who she was and she couldn't stop him without blowing her cover. Then they try to fight their way to the bridge, but Kovic gets injured by a helicopter missile. Wrecker and the rest manage to defend the USS Valkyrie, but Kovic's condition is very bad. In his last words, he asks others to make sure that Hana's husband lives and to tell Garrison to trust Hana. Then they take back the bridge from the enemies and rescue Garrison. He tells them it's gonna be a long way home through hostile waters and the ship is seriously damaged. Intel from Titan confirms that Pacific Central Command was wiped out by Chinese missile attack. Chang gained control over the sea territory. He orders Thompson to assault the airfield and light a flare for the Air Force to strike on it. Irish is not too keen on Hana going with them, but I guess no one cares about his opinion. They use the storm cover to strike on the airfield from the sea. Wrecker does a smooth job on driving a motorboat, but US forces are soon spotted by enemies who fire at them. Wrecker manages to make it to the beach and there's a real battle going on there. They manage to secure the beach and push forward through the streets of Shanghai. Soon they find an abandoned tank and use it to get close to the airfield. Then they use a neighboring building to get to the bridge. At this point, they are the only ones who made it so far from the units deployed by Garrison. Irish and Hana have another argument, but turns out Pak just graduated a correspondence leadership course and gives them a touching speech that ends the beef, for a while at least. They go through the bridge attacked by Chang's soldiers and storm waves, and one of them gets Wrecker stuck under a car, and while the rest tries to help him, a huge ship smashes the bridge and everyone fall into the water. Luckily they're all alright, and they take an underground passage that leads straight to the airfield. They reach the target area and Pak fires a flare. Now they got 30 seconds to get out before the drop. They find a jeep, Hana takes the wheel while Wrecker sits behind a machine gun. Before they are able to escape, the bombs start dropping and one of them hits the car. When Wrecker wakes up, he sees Irish trying to resuscitate Pak, but Pak doesn't respond. And soon Hana shows with a group of Chang soldiers, and looks like Irish Trust's instincts were right on the spot. We are informed 22 Marines were killed in an assault, but thanks to Thompson's actions, at least the ship made it safely through the Chang-controlled waters. Garrison considered the team missing in action, and we see Wrecker being interrogated and tortured by a guy named Bohai. Chang is also there, and an angry Irish slips something about a guy in the bandages, thinking that he is on Chang's side, but when Chang hears about him, he says they have no idea who they brought out of Shanghai. Wrecker passes out while he is electroshocked by Bohai, and he wakes up hearing Dima's voice, asking, does he know something about Jin-Jae? Then he gives Wrecker a sharp object. He says he trusts him, and he will help him get out of custody. Then he takes a pipe and pops a hole in the wall with it. And just for the record, Dima is a guy who appeared in the Battlefield 3, and if you want to see what happened there, just check out my other video. And so far, I tried really hard not to break the narrative character in this one, as the game tone is rather serious. And I've come so far, but in the end, well, I think they went just a little too far. I mean, I know that Chinese products are not always the durable ones, but a wall that you can break by 5 hits with a metal pipe, I mean, why waste time and money to build it? They could just put a few sticks in the ground, rub them with the yellow do not cross tape, and the result would be pretty much the same. Anyway, Wrecker follows Dima. They sneak on a few guards and reach the tower with a control room that can open every cell in the facility. Once there, they open the cells and a riot starts. Wrecker and Dima find Irish. He is obsessed about looking for Pac, and he starts running through the jail, yelling he won't leave without him. So I guess he must have somehow resurrected, because last time I checked, Pac was dead like it was 1996. When they reach the elevator, Irish realizes Pac is dead, and Dima asks Wrecker, "Is everything okay with your friend?" But actually, to list everything that is wrong with Irish would take longer than an elevator ride, so Wrecker decides to take a rain check on answering. The trio reaches another control room and Dima tries to open the gate while Wrecker and Irish cover him. Dima makes it and they are about to leave the building. But Bohai shows up and knocks down Wrecker. When Wrecker wakes up, he sees Hannah holding Irish at a gunpoint. But what's that? She shuts the guards and frees Wrecker, and the rest explaining, well, it is what it is, but she only wants to protect Jin-Jae. So Wrecker, Hannah, Dima and Irish open the gate, and turns out they are in Kunlun Mountains. But they manage to get on a tram and Hannah gets a little more time to deliver an explanation. As you probably already figured, the husband thing was just a CIA cover and Jin-Jae is actually on Valkyrie. So it's like super important to protect him from Chang. The tram gets stuck and enemy chopper attacks and shoots the cable, so the cabin falls down from the mountain and turns out it's the end of the road for the good old Dima. The rest is okay, but they are in the middle of nowhere, walking on the freezing cold until they reach road and somehow get a car. Hannah tells Irish that Chang killed all her relatives and burned down her village. And that actually reaches to his heart and he apologizes for the earlier trust issues. They reach the Marine undercover hideout, but there are Russian troops all over the place. They meet Molina, who is running an undercover operation here. He tells them to get to the old town. It's a long walk under enemy fire, but they reach Major Greenland. She tells them that if they help her to destroy a nearby dam, she will give them a ride. So they go to the dam and place the explosives. Next thing you know, the thing collapses down and everyone falls into the water again. But as usually, they are okay after falling from a huge ass altitude, and they get out of the water right on time to be picked up by Major Greenland's chopper. Turns out Greenland sends them to the Suez Canal. The Chinese have taken the northern part of the canal, and the US forces try to take it back. But if Valkyrie gets there before they do, they will swim straight into Chang's hands. Tombstone team is already on the plane and they see Valkyrie. They are dropped near it and must quickly get on board as the ship is already being taken over by Chang's soldiers. They fight their way through the ship looking for Jin-Jae, and at one point they are surprised by Pac? I have no idea how he made it alive and back on the ship. And he even tries to share that story, but Hannah interrupts him asking about Jin-Jae. So I guess we never know, it just happened. Pac takes them to the med bay and they meet Jin-Jae and Garrison there. Enemies are coming and Jin-Jae is pulling some serious Dalai Lama shit, refusing to take the gun as he believes that when Chinese soldiers see him, they will put down the weapons. He tries to convince Garrison to let him just talk to them instead of fighting. He takes off the bandage from his head and tells Garrison to let those soldiers inside. Wrecker opens the door and... yeah! Actually, Jin-Jae's plan worked, and when soldiers see his face, they obey him. Chinese squad leader informs everyone on the radio that Jin-Jae is alive, but he also tells Hannah that Chang is coming with a warship, and he plans to sink Valkyrie. The only thing they got left on this ship is a supply of C4, so they decide to load it on a motorboat and go to that Chang's warship. They swim close, plant C4 all over the place, and try to blow it up, but turns out the transmitter doesn't work. That means someone must go there and detonate it manually. Irish and Hannah argue about who should go, and Wrecker decides it will be Hannah. Then he pushes the button, the ship explodes all over the place, and then we see Tombstone, or at least what's left of it, flying on a chopper, and pilot reports one of them is missing in action. And that's how the game ends.
In 2015, Battlefield Hardline was released. It's a spin-off inspired by police TV shows like Miami Vice.
The intro shows us Officer Nick Mendoza being transferred by a jail bus to prison. Then the story takes us back 3 years earlier. Mendoza along with Carl Stoddard make a drug bust that goes violent and ends with a shootout followed by a car chase after the suspect. The game really tries to look as a typical police TV series like Miami Vice. The main thing is there's a new drug called Hotshot, so police prepares a special operation to find and capture whoever is behind it.
Oh, shit! The right to remain silent. Oh, you heard this before, huh?
After the arrest, Captain Julian Dawes partners up Nick Mendoza with Officer Kai Dao to follow the lead of a cocaine broker named Tyson Latchford. They go to slums to find a guy named Tup, who is Tyson's longtime friend with a criminal record. They know he's dealing cocaine in the neighborhood, so they convince him to wear a wire and go to Tyson's place to find the suspect. Tup convinced Tyson into selling him drugs, but at the same time a rival gang shows up and starts shooting all over the place. Mendoza and Dao step in and try to find Tyson. Turns out Tyson was never there, and they only find a notebook that Tyson was using to communicate with the others. Turns out he is hunted by killers who were sent by cartels, so they have to find him before they will. Soon after they arrive in Tyson's safe house, gangsters show up and Dao is wounded. Mendoza has to hold the attack before the support shows and saves the day.
God, get him, go! Get down! Hey, we're cops! We're cops! She's hit!
I think he hit an artery.
We're lucky he didn't bleed to death.
After Kai Dao is recovered, Dawes gives them another task. This time, they need to bring Leo Ray from the Elmore Hotel. Leo Ray is a drug dealer who wants to cooperate with police, but when they meet him on the parking lot, he tells he will only talk to Dawes, so things get a bit nasty and some other gangsters show up trying to kill Leo, but he manages to run away, leaving cops trapped in a parking lot shootout. They manage to escape through the basements, but it turns out the whole hotel is occupied by gangsters, but Leo is still hiding in the security office, so they have to get to him and walk him out of the building. Mendoza takes an armored truck, and after a crazy heist on the closed part of the highway, Leo is saved and Dawes takes him over to the safe place. Now Dawes wants Mendoza and Dao to investigate the swamps. Leo told the police that Remy Nels is the drug dealer that stands behind Hotshot business, and it were his soldiers who tried to kill Leo at the Elmore Hotel. Also, smugglers use planes to drop drug packages to the swamps, and gangsters use motorboats to collect them. They find few packages and mark them for evidence. Mendoza fights an alligator and Dao actually saves Mendoza's life this time. After that, they found out that Leo was killed by Nels's people for his cooperation with police. They locate Nels by tracking the evidence they found, but he escapes with a motorboat saying that he has a deal with Stoddard. And it really looks like Stoddard has taken over the case, but Mendoza decides to act on his own and enters Miami warehouse where Nels is hiding. They found him and try to arrest him, but Stoddard breaks in and just shoots him in the head. Mendoza is furious because he knows that Nels could confess about Stoddard being corrupted, but Dao tells him to let it go, and she takes part of the money that Stoddard is stealing from Nels. Stoddard gives a small amount to Mendoza, but he refuses and leaves. In Dao's office, it turns out that Dao was just checking if they can trust Mendoza. And since he didn't take the money, now Dao considers him as a part of the team. He tells Mendoza that every cop can be corrupted, and no one can be trusted, so they have to work on their own. Dao tells them to go back to the warehouse and look for more evidence. Meanwhile, a hurricane is invading the coast. Mendoza finds a voice recorder with a recording of a conversation between him and Stoddard. Kai says that a puppet found in the office can only be bought in one place in town, so of course they go there. Turns out it's filled with thugs, so Mendoza sneaks in from the roof. Inside, Stoddard has a meeting with Nels's people, referring to him as their boss. Mendoza sneaks in and finds him over a dead drug dealer body. Few seconds later, Stoddard saves Mendoza's life, and they both escape from the building that was set on fire by the remains of the Nels's soldier. Outside the warehouse, Mendoza wants to arrest Stoddard, but he receives a call from Kai, and she is in trouble, so they're both going to help her. Kai is trapped in a mall, surrounded by Nels's soldiers. When they reach her and safely get out of the mall, Mendoza wants to arrest Stoddard again, But this time, Dose shows up. Mendoza gives him evidence on Stoddard being connected to Miami drug business. Dose destroys the evidence and it turns out he and Kai are corrupted and Mendoza helped them to find and destroy evidence. Plus, they framed him into taking dirty money by transferring $30,000 to his bank account. Back to the present day, after 3 years in jail, Mendoza is on a prison bus being transferred. Turns out the top, the guy they made to wear a wire, is in the same bus. He is sent by Tyson and soon Tyson himself shows up, blows up the bus, and with the help of Tab, Mendoza escapes. He meets with Tyson and Kai. She is the mastermind of the Mendoza's escape and she apologizes for what happened and explains that Dawes is a bad guy who took over the drug business in Miami over Tyson and framed her. So Dawes looks like a hero now in the media, claiming that he put end to the drug chaos in Miami, while actually he took control of it behind the scenes. Now he wants to make a law enforcement a private business and he looks for investors. Now since he has Miami, his next target is LA. And Kai has a plan to stop Dawes, but she needs help from Mendoza. Mendoza still hates her guts, but he doesn't have much of a choice. He can help her or go back to prison. Kai has an inside man inside of one of Dawes' side business. His name is Boomer and he used to work for the military. Boomer is hacking Dawes' computers and he has a disk with evidence of Dawes being ahead of an organized crime. But Boomer is not answering any calls, so Tyson and Mendoza decide to break into a used cars showroom. There Mendoza finds a disk and the team tries to escape, but a truck shows up and smashes their car. After a shootout in the parking, Mendoza steals a car and drives through the suburbs. They reach a junkyard and find Boomer, who was captured while trying to download the files from the computer. Mendoza secures his notebook and helps him escape from the junkyard, but police shows up and they need to lose the tail driving through the sewers and underground station. Boomers explains that junkyard is used to put drugs in stolen cars that are delivered by trains from all over the country. The guy named Kang runs the place and Dawes is responsible for delivering the cars. They go to a car repair shop where Kang is putting drugs into cars. Inside, there's like a tons of cocaine and Tyson feels like Christmas has come sooner, but he has trouble with a forklift and gets stuck on a railroad. So puff goes the coke. Boomer hacks Kang's computer and discovers there's a party in a billionaire's house named Nail Rogue. Mendoza and Kai go there and break inside to plant a wire. But at the same time they're planting the device, a Rogue's bedroom. The security puts the power back on. And turns out, Rogue is back in the house, so Mendoza and Kyle had to hide in the closet. Stoddard works for Rogue, and during the meeting with drug dealers from LA, they force them to pay them money and receive a free pass for drug shipment in return, as Rogue and Dawes are controlling corrupted LA police. Mendoza puts a phone in one of the bags with money to track its location. But all of a sudden, Rogue pops up on a huge plasma, and turns out he was watching Mendoza sneaking in all the time on his security cameras. He thinks Mendoza is just a thief and alarms his gangsters. But then Kai shows up and points a gun to Rogue's head. But at this time, gangsters are already all over the place, and there's a heavy gunfight ended with some martial art kicks from Kai and confession about her motivation to destroy Dawes.
I want him ruined. Because that's what he does. He ruins people.
Boomer tracks a phone located in the suitcase. It's a huge, hard-to-get building. But first, Nick and Boomer go to meet Boomer's friend to borrow a special safe-breaking robot named the Beast. Turns out it's Alexandra Daddario in a white trash cosplay. She takes them to her father's place, and this guy is a bit overprotective, putting a GPS device on his daughter's hand. Also, he runs a little private army of radical nationalists, and he kinda hates Boomer's guts. Not because of his color skin, because he dated his daughter. At the beginning of the conversation, things look quite okay, but Tony and his men soon gunpoint Mendoza and Boomer and capture them hungry for money they can get for delivering Mendoza's head. Well, I guess they should have seen it coming, but they didn't spend much time in the cell since Boomer easily opens the door and they escape through the silos and with a little help of Dune, played by beloved Alessandro Daddario. After helping Boomer and Mendoza escape from her father's private military base, she says bye-bye to the boys and her GPS and leaves with a fancy car. Meanwhile, the gang take a classic PUBG vehicle and drive through the desert to find an old airport where the beast is hidden. Turns out Tony has like a private army there, because you know what is a Battlefield game without a tank mission, right? This one-on-one tank duel with Tony ends up with Boomer and Mendoza leaving with an airplane forward the sunset. Now they have all they need to go to Miami for the final chapter. And while they're preparing for a big finale, all of a sudden the safe house is attacked by Stoddard, but Mendoza is faster in this duel, and he manages to kill him. Back in Miami, Tyson, dressed as a worker, infiltrates the Dawes headquarters. Boomer covers the security camera working from a van outside the building. Tyson drops the rope from a roof. That's their escape route. Mendoza and Kyle sneak into the parking lot and they meet Tyson to give him the package of a C4 explosions. This mission feels kinda like Die Hard, you know, the tall building, a lot of bad guys and sneaking. And I know it's not Christmas, but actually it's 4th of July, so maybe it was supposed to look like Die Hard after all. Tell me what you think in a comment section and maybe you spotted some other Easter eggs. Mendoza and Kyle find a private elevator and blew up the C4 that was planted at the water tank on the roof. Water fills the elevators and they swim up using oxygen masks. And I guess 4th of July fireworks masks the explosion a little bit and the whole team meets to open the safe. Now that the beast has done its job with the safe, Tyson grabs the door and opens it and boom! They were trapped by the explosives. That means Dawes knew they were coming for him. Actually, he calls Mendoza and tells him that he is waiting for them at Santa Rosada. And one epic, oh my god, oh no, what the hell, rope slide and some street shooting later, they meet Boomer on the bay and use a boat to escape. And it turns out Tyson is not dead, but just heavily injured. Okay, that seems legit, Battlefield Hardline. Anyways, the team goes to Santa Rosada, and they argue who should go to handle those, but Mendoza wants to do this on his own and he convinces Kai that's a good idea. Tyson looks more like he had a rough hockey game than his freaking face blown up by the goddamn bomb! But if this one is supposed to be a Cop TV series tribute, then I guess it kinda worked that way back in Miami Vice days. Mendoza penetrates Dawes' private paradise fortress and step by step reaches Dawes' office. Dawes plays it cool and tries to mess with Mendoza with a classic "you're not a killing me" kinda guy. Then he even offers him a job as his right arm, but Mendoza is like, "Bitch, I'm here for revenge, not a job interview!" And he kills Dawes, cold-blooded. But wait, what's that? There's a letter on the desk, addressed to Mendoza. Dawes predicted Mendoza was killing him and now he reveals to him his secret basement, explaining how he operated. Basically, it is what it is and the drug business is giving everyone too much money and too many people are involved just to end it like that. But since you killed me, I guess now it's yours. Do what you want. And the game ends with a cliffhanger asking a question: what are you going to do? And everyone has to answer this one for themselves. So what would you do? Keep the money and run the empire? Or try to bring justice and stop the drug shipments? That was Battlefield Hardline story recap, and leave a thumbs up if you liked the video and subscribe the channel if you don't want to miss other video game recaps.
And then the franchise took us back in time to the battlegrounds of Great War with the release of Battlefield 1.
Game starts in the hospital where we see a French soldier sleeping, and then we are taken to the front line where he is a part of a brutal battle against German soldiers. Next we are taken to the other battle where British soldiers are surrounded by Germans in the ruined town. They try to hold their ground, being attacked by enemies from every direction. They fight bravely until the soldiers equipped with flamethrowers shows up and burn them alive. The perspective switches into machine gun operator, fighting against German infantry. There's also a blimp flying over the background and soon it destroys the machine gun station. Brits retreat to a nearby church and try to hold on there, but again, the flamethrowers are too hard to handle and we see another death of a British soldier. It's pointed out how new weapons were changing the odds in the battles, and then we get to the tank pushing through to help the soldiers overpowered on the front line. Enemy infantry is basically helpless against the tank division, and it opens a path to retreat for the infantry. But soon German artillery starts firing and the tank gets destroyed. It repeats few times, just to show us how brutal the Great War actually was. Then the perspective gets back to the soldiers from the beginning, showing him surviving the artillery bombing, and when he gets back on his feet, there's only him and one German soldier left alive in the battlefield. They aim at each other, but both decide to put the weapon down. Then we see battles in different parts of the world, from muddy trenches through high mountains and endless deserts, showing a scale of the conflict. Then we see a huge British mansion and a man working as a chauffeur. He looks at his hands and he has a flashback of the fall, 1918. In the last weeks of the war, the British army fights in France with the Germans in an exhausting trench war. British Mark V tanks are the game changers, since they are able to clear the trenches and break through the barbed wire. Allied command prepares a massive assault on the town Cambrai, counting on that tank support. Edwards is a tank driver preparing for the battle. He is assigned to the tank called Black Bass. He meets Finch, McManus, and others, and they are sent to destroy the artillery positions. They go after the infantry, and Edwards must be careful not to get stuck in the mud. They capture Piccadilly Hill from the enemy, making a passage for the infantry. Then they progress, securing a few more spots until the artillery fire breaks the tank. Edwards and Finch must get out to make necessary repairs, but a nearby explosion injures Finch, and soon he gets killed. Edwards is shocked, but he gets together and manages to repair Black Bass. They sneak on that German artillery and destroy it, securing the Cambrai town. When the tank progresses further, trying to get into enemy trenches, it gets stuck in the deep mud and Germans start to surround it, trying to kill the crew. The only hope is to send a pigeon, since there was no radio communications back then. Edwards is stunned, but he manages to release the bird that delivers a message to the headquarters requesting an urgent fire mission. British artillery fires on the coordinates and boys get lucky and the tank survives the bombing. Commander Townsend is injured and McManus shows a disobedience. Edwards tries to start the engine, but it's broken and the fuel starts leaking. McManus covers the leak and the tank starts, so they manage to get out of the mud. While they try to go through the forest, Townsend orders Edwards to scout ahead, since there is a heavy fog. So he sneaks on few German posts and helps the tank to pass through the forest, cleaning bunkers and alternative positions. Then he gets back to the driver's seat and they roll further until Bass breaks in the middle of the night and McManus says she needs new sparklights. Townsend sends Edwards and McManus to the nearby village, since they spotted German tanks there. It's risky, but sneaking into the village and stealing the parts is their only chance before the sun rises, and they will get spotted by enemies anyway. But while they get out of the tank, McManus tells Edwards that Townsend will be dead by morning, and the tank is too damaged to be repaired. He tries to convince Edwards to abandon the mission, but he refuses. McManus leaves by himself. Edwards goes along and sneaks on Germans, stealing parts from their tanks without getting spotted. He returns to Bass and tries to fix the tank, but turns out he gets attacked by a German soldier. But look who decided to get back. It's McManus who stops the enemy and saves Edwards. He says that he lost his way and decided to go back. So with a fresh spirit, damaged tank, working on a stolen German parts, dying commander, rookie driver, and an asshole McManus, what can go wrong while advancing through the village Bourlon, which lies behind enemy lines? Nothing really. Actually, they cut like a knife through a butter and find a rail yard, take down a battalion of enemies and a dozen of their tanks, playing cat and mouse around the railroads, and push back 2 counterattacks of an overwhelming German forces. And just when they start to consider themselves immortal, a truck breaks, and while Edward gets out to fix it, a grenade explodes near him and a horde of Jerrys run at them. McManus jumps out to help, but he gets shot. Townsend makes every bullet count, but he also eventually takes one from the enemy. So, things don't look good and Commander decides to use that fuel leak that happened earlier to grill those German sausage, and turns out that was a brilliant move. Well, Edward's skin must be a fireproof material since he survived while all the rest around him burns. And turns out McManus is also still alive, so Edward grabs him and they walk. And we get an info that 300 tanks took part in the battle, and I guess Black Bass destroyed at least 50 of them. 1 month earlier the war was over, but the game is not. So it gets us back to 1970. The Allies are losing the war in the air. Well, they are a bit short on pilots, so they use low experienced ones and try to work on their aircraft designs with changing luck. Blackburn and Rackham are playing poker, and though Blackburn loses, he still takes Rackham's plane because I guess that's how he rolls. Pretending to be Rackham, he jumps on the plane and up he goes. Along with the second pilot, they are testing the abilities of Bristol F2 fighter. It is a new design, freshly developed, to the front. Everything goes smooth until Germans appear with their pokers and the battle starts. Blackburn and Wilson manage to shoot down a few of them and decide to follow the last remaining. They fly into the clouds, and next thing we see is they are in the middle of enemy territory and German soldiers start to shoot at them from the ground. But actually Blackburn does a brilliant job avoiding getting shot down while Wilson is taking some pictures of German positions. They take those to the headquarters and Wilson shows the pictures to the commander, who is more than impressed. Soon they are sent on another mission. This time they were part of a squadron that was supposed to clear the way for the bombers. Well, the air is filled with barrage blimps and the ground with anti-aircraft. Squadron needs to take down both so the bombers could destroy a nearby fortress. When the bombers arrive, they protect them on the way to the fortress and it gets destroyed as planned. Unfortunately, their plane got hit and it crashes in no man's land. Blackburn managed to jump out, but Wilson wasn't that lucky. But since Blackburn landed on an enemy territory, he must find a way back. So he sneaks behind German soldiers and tries to return to friendly lines. Luckily for him, there are no fights going on right now, so enemies are not in their combat readiness. Under the shadow of a misty night, Blackburn sneaks through the trenches. At one point, he even finds his plane wreckage in no man's land, and guess what? Wilson is still alive. Blackburn tries to grab him, but Wilson is injured, so he tries to leave him that he thought they were friends. And just for the record, if you didn't figure out yet, Blackburn is a selfish asshole with no moral corpse. So when Wilson tells him to finish him, he actually listens, but hesitates when Wilson uses his real name. Turns out he knew Blackburn is not Rackham, and that way he impresses Blackburn enough to earn himself a lift back. Blackburn runs under German fire, but his famous luck again didn't let him down, and they make it to British trenches. Well, unfortunately, Rackham, the real one, is already there and he gets Blackburn arrested. Back in London, Blackburn sails on a warship along with Wilson, who tells him he will speak for him in front of the court-martial. But before they reach the port, German Fokkers attack. Rackham looks for a gunner and Blackburn volunteers, but Rackham doesn't want him. Few seconds later, he gets killed, so Wilson frees Blackburn and they take a plane and get into the air combat, doing a brilliant job on shooting down enemy planes. Soon bombers show up, but again Blackburn and Wilson deal with them and prevent bombing. But no time for a tea break, since a giant blimps appeared from the clouds. While fighting with them, Blackburn spots an AA gun on one of them and tries to divert its attention but gets shot and crash lands on that blimp. That's right, he lands on a blimp. Both Wilson and Blackburn are okay. They walk on the blimp surface to get to the flag gun. Blackburn reaches it and he takes down the gunner. Then he grabs it and uses it to shoot down German Fokkers and the other blimp, turning over the whole battle. He gets attacked by an enemy, but Wilson fights him while Blackburn focuses on destroying the other blimp. And then they jump down before the burning blimp hits the one they are on. So both blimps crash and the lads fall into the water of Thames. In conclusion, Blackburn points out that a selfish man risks his own life to save another, and in doing so, he found out he saved himself. He also speculates that this story might be told in a different way. He could be portrayed as a liar, criminal, and murderer who just took advantage of an air attack while he was on the way for a trial, but then he jokes that he wouldn't lie to us, right? Well, time to admire some stunning Italian Alps landscapes. We take the perspective of an elite mountaineer regiment, the Adriti. A man named Luca is watching old war photos and memorizing his past. He introduces his brother Matteo and tells the story of their last battle. They both were 21 years old back then, and Matteo's battalion had been ordered to capture a fort deep into enemy territory, and that's how they got divided, since the other brother was part of the Adriti. Well, they kinda look like the knights from the Brotherhood of Fallout, carrying a heavy armor and big machine guns. Adriti captured Anastasia Church, supporting the fighting infantry, including his brother. Then he captures the Austro-Hungarian anti-aircraft gun and helps to stop the bombers squadron that was about to bomb his brother's unit. So he handles the bombers, and the fighters decide to shoot rocks and try to bury Italian soldiers alive. Also, one of the planes crashes near Luca, but turns out his armor saved him from the explosion. He takes it off and decides to go look for Matteo. He goes through the trenches, helping pinned allies to defend their post on the way. He searches through the trenches and bunkers until he reaches the fort at the top of the hill and finds his brother's body. Luca's story ends with a conclusion about the last generation, since never before humanity experienced such a huge loss and disaster. Next chapter takes us to the Turkish coast, where British Empire intends to open a new front, with the biggest single fleet yet assembled, carrying over 500,000 men, including soldiers from Australia, New Zealand, or even India. Frederick Bishop is on a ship near the coast, and he is approached by a young man named Jack Foster. Turns out he is a fan of Bishop's achievements, who is considered to be a hero, but Bishop doesn't return much of the enthusiasm. He uses his binoculars to spot enemy positions, and Foster Morse codes them to dreadnought operators. After that, Bishop decides that it's time to go, but he tells Foster to stay and wait for the signal. Then he storms the beach along with other British soldiers and fights over the Ottomans to secure the trenches and take over the beach. Soon they reach the Hellas overlook and manage to secure the spot. Bishop sends a flare, but turns out Foster didn't wait for it. So Bishop gets mad and shows him dozens of bodies to make him aware how lucky he was to make it here in one piece. Foster panics a bit, but Bishop rises up his spirit, telling him, "You are Australian. Impossible to kill." Then he teaches him how to properly use a rifle. Bishop reports to the commander, and he decides to send young Foster to the front line as a runner. Bishop steps in and convinces the commander to let him do the job. So he runs through the town to gather reports from the front line, then he takes them back to Whitehall. Turns out his outpost is under heavy attack. Foster hides in one of the houses and he proves his shooting ability. Whitehall shows up and Bishop reports the lines are falling. Commander sends Bishop to tell the rear command to move up. But he only finds a note that everyone is retreating and the artillery is preparing to attack the village. He runs back and informs Whitehall about the full-scale retreat, and it turns out he's already sent men up to secure the front. Bishop decides to go and help Foster and the others. So he sneaks to the fort and he finds Foster there. And you know what the kid told him? "I'm not leaving my mates behind just like that." So Bishop decides to help them and cover their retreat, creating a distraction. Bishop surprises the soldiers at the top of the fort, and actually, he takes the goddamn fort away from the enemy by himself. But after hanging that flag, he gets shot by one of the remaining Ottoman soldiers. So, when he takes a look down, he sees flare fired by Foster, and a few seconds later, the artillery starts heavy shooting. In a conclusion, we are informed that after 9 months of fighting, Ottomans actually held Gallipoli. Meanwhile, in Arabia, a very different desert campaign, including Lawrence of Arabia, takes place. Arab tribes rebel against their historical oppressors, the Ottoman Empire, wielding rifles from horseback against armored vehicles, aircrafts, and artillery. Lawrence is a British officer working with a small force of rebels. He plans to capture the cargo from the crashed Ottoman train. He sneaks on enemies and steals their weapons. Then he enters the train and steals an important codebook. But the Ottomans capture him. Soon it turns out it was part of the plan, and the other rebels were surrounding the place just waiting for the signal, and it wasn't even Lawrence who got captured. An Ottoman officer threatens Lawrence and his rebels. At one point Zara loses her temper, but Lawrence calms her down. Well, rebels actually want that train to be lured into a trap and destroy it. And the book of codes they just found is the key to send orders to this machine. So now rebels need to take over 3 Ottoman posts to use their high priority message capsules to send message with false orders to the train. Lawrence sends Zara for the job and she is doing well until she is surprised and knocked down by the Ottoman officer they met earlier. He tells her that mission was compromised and the warnings about their plans were already sent. Turns out he escaped Lawrence's captivity and also revealed the location of rebel camps. But he gets a bit too cocky with her and she uses the moment to stab him with his own knife. Then she rides back to Lawrence's camp, but it's already been attacked by Ottomans. Luckily, rebels managed to escape before the attack. Lawrence plans to ambush the train anyway. Zara sets down the explosives on the rails to stop the train. Rebels use the moment to attack with all they have. They use the Ottoman cannons captured earlier by Zara and destroy the damn thing. And the success of this mission encourages Lawrence to plan something bigger. He even mentions Suez Canal. In conclusion, we learned that though Ottomans were driven from Arabia, Britain and France reneged on their promise of Arab independence. Once again we see a great war front, and the main characters we met during the campaign, with some narration about war making its mark on history. And actually that's how the game ends.
Next game release in 2019 had similar vibe of the story, but for the first time we got single-player campaign settled in the World War II.
Game starts with a radio statement from the British Prime Minister who declares a war on Germany. Then we get a prologue showing campaigns in Norway, Libya, Tunisia, Germany and Netherlands. After that the plot takes us to London in spring 1942. Churchill decided to create a new type of unit, recruiting soldiers from prison convicts. Billy Bridger is one of them. He becomes a part of two-man team as an explosive specialist. Led by Mason, they move through the rocky coast. They try to get to the airstrip and blow it up. On their way, they need to take down some German posts and avoid being detected. Bridger sneaks into the hangar, plants explosives on the Stuka aircraft and gets back to Mason. But it turns out that only the bombs planted by Mason exploded and the one planted by Bridger fell off the plane while it was lifting off. As the plane is now on their asses, Mason orders Bridger to get on the anti-aircraft cannon and shoot it down. Though all in all, the mission was accomplished, Mason is really angry that they almost got killed. They are interrupted by a German soldier who takes them at gunpoint, but next thing we see is Boyce driving his car with Jerry locked in the trunk. Bridger gets the next assignment. This time he is on his own. And we can see that Mason is injured. Bridger sneaks on a nearby garrison and steals a car. They drive away and Bridger tells Mason he radioed a boat to come for them. When Mason hears that, he is terrified. And soon he spots a German on the horizon. Well, turns out that by sending the radio message, Bridger actually alarmed all German units in the neighborhood. Now they must escape under heavy fire and soon their car breaks. At this point Bridger has a mental breakdown, but Mason gets his spirit together. The duo takes defensive position in a nearby abandoned German post and waits for the enemies. They fight bravely, though being approached from ground and air. Luckily for them, soon a British warship and some air support shows up and helps them. So Bridger's radio message must have reached them after all. In conclusion, we are informed that SBS continued to fight through the war, engaging in Greece, Italy and mainland Europe, actually becoming a blueprint for a modern special forces. Next stop, Rjukan, Norway, spring 1943. Small British commando attempted a ride, but their mission was unsuccessful. A German officer questions a woman named Astrid Bjornstad. He suspects that she is a part of the resistance and might know something about the mysterious soldiers that kills Nazis under the shadow of the night. Well, she changes subject to a purpose of the plant and what it produces. And what it is actually a heavy water for the atom bomb purposes. Meanwhile, a lonesome soldier is approaching the facility from the woods. Turns out it's Astrid's daughter, who sneaks inside and finds her mom. Astrid tells her daughter that Germans are building something terrible in this factory and they need to find out what it is. After infiltrating the buildings, Astrid orders her daughter to destroy electrical substances. Then they meet back at the bridge, but it turns out they get ambushed. The German officer who was questioning Astrid earlier steps in and orders not to kill them. Astrid tells him that's her daughter and hacks her, creating a little distraction that she uses to give her some documents from the factory and push her down from the bridge. Solvik, because that's the girl's name, survives the fall and now she is on her own in the middle of a freezing night. At one point she even falls into the water and struggles not to freeze to death, but in the middle of the forest she spots a house in the distance and manages to reach it. She kills a German soldier inside, but she's so exhausted she passes out herself. And when she wakes up in the morning, she looks at the documents that her mom has given her. So, the factory produces heavy water, a key ingredient in a new type of bombs that Germans are secretly making. Astrid wrote a letter explaining that the heavy water transport that will be shipped tomorrow must be stopped to prevent Nazis from producing a bomb capable of destroying entire cities. Solvik must destroy the heavy water supplies in the depot where they store it and the dockyards where it's prepared to be shipped. After she deals with the heavy water, she also approaches a nearby village where Nazis are holding key documents about the resistance. Once she breaks into the police building, girl uses a kerosene lamp to burn the place down. Solveig overhears a radio announcement about the remaining heavy water supplies stored in a nearby bunker, so she goes there to destroy it as well. Inside, she spots her mom on one of the trucks, and again, she is talking to German officer, trying to make him aware how deadly those bombs will be. Unfortunately, Solveig gets spotted and the truck with Astrid leaves the place. Girl pursues the trucks and manages to reach them and destroy the cargo. She looks for Astrid, but a German U-boat appears and her mom is taken aboard. Shootout starts and Astrid uses the distraction to grab a grenade, but the German officer shoots her before she can do any math. Solveig gets cornered, but Astrid manages to unlock the grenade and a huge explosion destroys the last barrels of heavy water. In conclusion, we are informed that destroying the Norwegian heavy water production made the Germans' Uran project fail to produce a nuclear weapon. Then we are taken to Provence, France. It's autumn 1944. Allies are battling to retake Europe. We see a transport of soldiers arriving in France, being transported from African colonies. But once they reach the front line, they are threatened as a second-category troops, until their captain volunteers his men to take a shot on taking a German AA gun protecting the key enemy fortress in an old chateau. While on the road, their transport is attacked by planes and they must go to the checkpoint through the forest. Then they progress to the front line and destroy Schanze field guns. They push through the trenches and blow up the guns. Then they assault and secure the Stützpunkt Geist. Idrissa tells the others to rest, but his brother insists on progressing to take down the AA guns and actually convinces the rest with the speech how they can get into history books if they deal with those guns. So, the squad progresses, sneaking carefully on the gun positions and destroying them one by one. They succeeded, but many of them were lost in the battle. Idrissa is very angry about the casualties. One of the captured German soldiers tells them that they are surrounded and soon a counterattack will crush them anyway. Idrissa gets a bit scared, but his brother tells him if they escape now, all those men have lost their lives for nothing. So they decide to go for the chateau because that is what enemy is not expecting. So with just a few men left, they try to sneak in. Deme goes on a one-man mission to secure a passage for the rest. He manages to sabotage the village defenses. The rest joins him and they attack a western bastion. That opens a road straight into the chateau. They perform a brave charge at the western gate and use a captured field gun to break it. Once inside, they use a surprise element, but the Germans inside have a tank, so French soldiers are pushed back. Deme gets shot, and Idrissa drags him away and saves his life, rushing at the tank with a grenade. Idrissa gets heavily injured and dies. Deme takes his gun and with just 2 other soldiers, he gets into the castle. Inside, they find no resistance from the enemy, just injured German soldiers. Soon more French troops arrive and secure the place, and in the conclusion, we learn that though the black troops had made a massive impact on the war, the French army pulled them back as soon as Paris was liberated. An estimated 25,000 soldiers from Africa died fighting for a country most of them had never seen before. Finally, the plot takes us to Rhine-Ruhr region in Germany in spring 1945. There, General Bradley's army presses the borders of Germany with an overwhelming advantage, both on ground and in the air. Peter Müller is a commander of Tiger Tank number 237, along with driver Kurtz and 2 very young boys. They are part of the German defense. Hitler orders his men to fight to the end, though the war is already lost for them. Hartmann is scared, while Schroeder is under a propaganda influence. Tiger 237 is sent to destroy enemy artillery positions in the center of the city. Then they battle armored columns near the railroad. They manage to destroy a few Sherman tanks, proving the Tiger tank's reputation of being the most advanced tank unit in its time. Soon bombers arrive, but Kurtz manages to drive away without being hit. They find a hideout, but they quickly need to scout a way out of the city. Müller sends young Hartmann, who is scared as hell, but Schroeder convinces the commander that it's their best chance because Hartmann is useless anyway. Soon the enemy column passes by and Müller doesn't want to leave Hartmann behind, but they have no choice. They are ordered to reach the German main base and grab all the important documents before the enemy captures them. Tank gets damaged on the way, so Müller decides to go alone and reach the anti-air gun while Kurtz fixes the machine. He manages to capture the gun and destroys the bomber. Meanwhile, Kurtz fixes the Tiger and they progress through the streets. Müller gets into the building and finds documents. On the way to the HQ, located in the cathedral, Müller looks at the destroyed city, civilian casualties and deserters hanging on the ladders. At one point, he spots Hartmann, who was also hanged. Schroeder considers him a traitor, but Müller argues that he was just doing his duty. When they reach headquarters, it turns out no one's there. Radio communication is dead, so Müller looks for a working one. He gets a message which orders all forces at the cathedral to defend the bridgehead, and at that precise moment, US troops surround the square and ask Germans to give up. Schroeder decides to shoot at them and fight till the end. Since he did it, now it's too late to give up, so they try to break their way out. And actually, they manage to do that and get out of the square. So they escape and try to rejoin the main forces. But turns out, the bridge gets destroyed before they are able to cross it, and one of their caterpillars gets damaged. At this point, Kurtz has enough, and he wants to give up, telling Müller it's all one big lie and they destroyed the bridge and left them behind anyway. Müller tries to convince him to stay, but he turns around and walks away. Schroeder shoots Kurtz in the back. In a rage of fury, he tries to fight upcoming US soldiers, while Müller is standing over Kurtz's dead body and loses faith in what he was serving. Müller gives up, and when Schroeder spots that, he wants to shoot him too. screen fades out, and we hear again fire. But it's hard to say whether Schroeder killed Miller or US soldiers killed him before he can take a shot. In conclusion, we are informed that, led by their furious leader, Germans fight till the end. Then we get a short outro summarizing the war in a poetic blah blah about humanity and hope. And that's how the game ends.
And 15 years has passed since Battlefield introduced the future world from 2142, and this time the series went 100 years earlier, before the Ice Age.
In 2028, Eastern Europe is caught in a vast fire known as the Baltic Firestorm. Not only the continent faces a massive destruction, but also pollution and a global temperature rise in the aftermath that led to a major sea level rise. In 2031, the Earth begins experiencing an increasingly severe extreme climate. Environmental degradation starts forming violent hurricanes. The first Category 6 hurricane, Hurricane Zeta, appears on October 9, 2033. The climate begins to threaten the existence of human civilization. Global shortages of food and fuel take place, and the Second Great Depression starts on January 11, 2034. On May 2035, Germany's government collapses and the European Union is disbanded, leaving the continent in turmoil. Many countries close their borders during the crisis, and as more governments collapse, over 1.2 billion people become displaced with no nation to call home. Those alienated people join together, creating fleets and begin to seek safe harbor. Those people came to be known as the non-patrioted, or NOPADs for short. By 2037, the United States and Russia are the only remaining superpowers as humanity begins adapting to the new world. Technological breakthroughs in energy and desert irrigation begin to stabilize, while some coastal cities became livable again due to the hydraulic levees and seawalls. National borders are reopened and society begins to rebuild. But many NOPADs reject calls to rejoin the countries of the old world, having created their own identity unbound with any national loyalty. As a result, NOPADs become a permanent fixture in all areas of global decision-making. Many countries, including the United States, begin discriminating NOPAD groups as illegal smugglers, criminals, and pirates. In response, NOPADs begin forming task forces, armed groups of ex-military specialists from around the world to defend themselves when necessary. To overcome the extreme climate, Canada and the United States start Operation Steadfast Refuge. They produce a satellite known as the Shearwater 1, a terraforming satellite capable of controlling weather patterns to repair inhabitable lands that were destroyed by hurricanes. In the year 2040, during the first attempt to remove a hurricane, the Shearwater encouraged an error and accidentally released an EMP over the atmosphere, causing a massive shutdown of global energy supplies. After the blast, a space debris storm takes place in Earth's super atmosphere that causes a Kessler effect, causing over 70% of orbiting satellites to crash into the planet. The planet faces a global blackout. Communication grids are destroyed, air travel is disrupted, supply lines are halted, and the economy goes crazy. Over 100,000 people are claimed to have died as a result of the blackout. In the aftermath, military surveillance has become almost impossible, and the United States and Russia blame each other for causing the blackout. Others believe that NOPADs may have been responsible, possibly desiring to create an anarchy. The two superpowers begin a shadow war to secure vital resources. Attempting to avoid declaring a full-scale war, both sides begin fleeting NOPADs task forces as proxies in their conflicts, promising NOPADs access to their resources in return. Those conflicts continue to escalate in scale, and by 2042, open global war becomes inevitable. The remaining unaligned NOPADs are forced to pick sides. By 2041, the US and Russia begin to launch new spy satellites to replace ones lost during the blackout. But to their surprise, NOPADs hijacked a majority of the satellites, As a result, United States and Russia start to launch a new type of spy satellites. Those satellites have no network capability. Instead, they will fly over hostile territory and gather information. Then, the revelatory crash, allowing ground forces to manually recover their data drives. The areas these satellites crash became known as hazard zones, where NOPAD's forces trying their best to steal data drives. Those data drives with intelligence become valuable goods for trading among the dark market, and military intel becomes a real currency. While most NOPADs simply sell them for money, one of them, named Oz, sees the opportunity to change the world. On September 12, 2041, in Doha, Qatar, journalist Kaivan Bashir is contacted by an anonymous source claiming to be Oz, who is the commander of the largest organized NOPAD task force. Bashir's home is raided by Qatari police shortly after being contacted, escaping the police under the cover of sandstorm. Bashir notices the NOPAD emblem hidden in the multiply LED billboards around the city. Following the trail of the emblems, Bashir reaches the catacombs below the city abandoned soccer stadium and meets the NOPAD specialist Piotr Gustovsky, who shows Bashir an escape route out of the city. Bashir arrives at the safe house of a NOPAD task force in Alang, India on November 1st, 2041 and joins them. Later that evening, the group attacks the ship breaking yard in Alang. Headed by Navin Rao, the ship escapes the port and the army under the cover of heavy storm nicknamed the Copperfield by the task force. The Copperfield would proceed to haul supplies between NOPAD's groups in the Indian Sea for the next several months following remote orders from Oz, but begins transporting refugees in early 2042. One such refugee mission results in a skirmish with the Singaporean Port Authority at Brandy Island in February 2042. The Copperfield is nearly captured before being rescued by a large NOPAD flotilla, which drives the SPA away. By early May 2042, specialist Ji-Soon Park had infiltrated Daesung Electronics in South Korea under the orders of Oz himself. On May 8, he causes an explosion at Daesung headquarters, steals data and reaches the Copperfield. In late June, Oz illegally buys weapons from Russians and takes it to their destination, Kourou, French Guiana, to head them off to a local militia there. The exchange is interrupted by an attack of United States soldiers. Some of the members of the task force, including Bashir, Rao and Maria Flak, escaped on a different ship bound to the Russian-controlled Cheftaya Neft oil facility in Queen Mounland, Antarctica. Shortly after arriving, the NOPADs discovered that Russia has begun refusing to give oil to NOPADs ships who do not swear loyalty to the nation. Oz task force, of course, refuses to swear the loyalty and remains trapped. On August 14, 2042, the MFS-04 Exodus, under the command of Captain Kimball Graves of Oz's NOPAD's fleet, arrives with the rescue mission. Russians at first think it's American ship, so they open fire, but Exodus manages to pick up Oz task force and departs. On October 10th, the Exodus is en route to Sierra Leone, but Oz reroutes it to London, England. There, Captain Graves enters the flooded city alone to meet a contact with information valuable to Oz. American Marine Clayton Pekovsky, a former squadmate of Greaves, interrupts the handoff, killing the contact but being injured in the process. Greaves recovers the contact's briefcase and brings Pekovsky back to the Exodus for medical treatment as prisoner. Oz directs the Exodus to the Mediterranean Sea, where three MV-38 corridors will pick up the briefcase. Pekovsky warns Greaves that Oz will use the information in the briefcase to start another global war, which Graves discards. However, Rao accesses the briefcase contents against Greaves' wishes and discovers that it contains coordinates for the crash site of Shearwater 1, which will fall to Earth in 36 hours. Realizing that Oz intends to sell that information to Russians and force a conflict with the Americans, Greaves decides to turn against Oz and stop his plans, so he sails the Exodus into an approaching Category 5 storm to escape. Condors open fire on the ship, but when it enters the storm, the Condors collide with each other. One of Oz's soldiers locates Greaves' son Omar and takes him hostage to force Greaves to hand over the intel. Bashir having witnessed the kidnapping, follows the soldier and encounters Pakowski handcuffed. Pakowski convinces Batcher that he wants to help, and Batcher uncuffs the Marine, who chases after the soldier and Omar. Cornered after attempting to shoot down the remaining Condor with a missile launcher, Greaves is shown his son held at gunpoint. With Omar's life at risk, Greaves hands the briefcase to Oz soldier, but Oz orders to kill Omar anyway. However, Pakowski arrives and shoots him, saving Omar, but attracting the attention of the Condor, which fires on Pakowski and kills him. Hiding Omar behind a shipping container, Greaves recovers the missile launcher and shoots down the Condor. In the aftermath of the attack, Greaves discovers that the soldier had managed to send the coordinates to Oz before dying. Moved by Pakowski's sacrifice, Greaves directs the Exodus to the crash coordinates in Doha and puts out a call to any listening Nopads to join him in fight. Since the massive open war is inevitable, Nopads must choose sides in order to survive. And that's the background of the story in Battlefield 2042. Since the game is strictly multiplayer, it does not provide any storyline, just the battle scenarios that can go both ways depending on players. And so far, this is all that happened in Battlefield Modern and Future Warfare storyline, containing Battlefield 2, 3, 4 and Battlefield 2142.